Well, hello, welcome to the purchasing module and Techno ERP webinar. We're going to cover some things in here that you may not have used before, some things that you may have used before. So most everybody using the ERP is already familiar with purchasing, been using the purchasing module. Claire, could you mute yourself too whenever you're not actively talking things? So you may learn a little bit in this, you may learn a lot, just depending on your how much you've used the ERP system. I put a lot of topics in today's video. I'm going to run through most of them fairly briefly though. So we're going to look at how to enter a purchase order, how to use regular POs versus make from purchase orders versus out service, how to allow your employees to create requests. And then you can convert those requests directly into quotes or into purchase orders, how to track purchase open orders in your delivery schedules, how to perform receipts, do revisions, do inspections, do return to vendor, how to automate your conversions using your primary vendor so you can take advantage of some of the automations in the ERP, how to look at manage your inventory demands with MRP, and really that could be a whole webinar in itself, so we'll just briefly touch on that, and reorder, how to set up your vendor contacts and email out POs, how to set up vendor cross-reference part numbers and vendor costing, and how to do vendor surveys. We've also got looking at buy versus stock unit of measurement conversions and some of the company settings that are in there that relate to that. In the purchasing menu, we've got request and reorder, quotes, orders, schedule, receipts, just kind of showing you what all is in here, return to vendor. The bottom of every module has the query custom, the charts and graphs, the totals, and the history. If we have time at the end, I'll briefly show some of those. We've got a vendor cross-reference screen we added for being able to look at all those together. You know, when you right-click on an item, you can look at its specific cross-reference parts, but this is a list that shows you everything. And then all these with the magnifying glass relate to inspection. And there's some setup that can be done there depending on what level of inspection you do. And if you want to record tolerances and what that measurement was and the variance and all that, we've got options for that. Rev codes, this is for when you do revisions to PO, like they called and made a change or the vendor couldn't deliver in time, things like that. So you set up your own codes for why you would revise a PO. Then we've got some utilities. We've got a cost change tool, and we've got a price import tool. So those are handy when you need to do things in mass, so you don't have to open each part one by one. Let's look at how to enter a purchase order. So in the ERP, I'm going to go to purchasing and orders. And here's our giant list screen. And everyone may have different fields on their screen. You can add fields here and move them around, just the widths, and save your layout using this icon at the top. So you can have your screen set up for what makes sense for you. So we've got new PO and new MF, which stands for make from, and I'll talk about that here in a moment. First, let's look at new PO. So the good thing is that whether you're doing a request, a quote, or a purchase order, in our system, it's all the same screen. It's just a change of status. So this will make it easy to get familiar with using any of those and converting from one to another. Now, when we start off, the order number comes from your next numbers that are set up in your company defaults, but you can technically click in here and change it. You can also set it up to have prefixes. Next, we have the vendor number, or if you're not used to using vendor number, you can type the vendor name, and then you press tab, and it will pull in some information from the vendor. You've also got this little icon here, which opens your vendors list. So in case you needed to add a new vendor on the fly or edit the existing vendor, you can do that. Now the terms for the vendor and some other things like the freight carrier method, these type things flow from the vendor. So you can have those defaults set up so it knows how you want to process or transact for that vendor. Then we can select a contact. In this case, we've got Bilbo and Frodo Baggins work for ABC Metals, I guess. You can select a contact. These come from the vendor's contacts list here. And later when you go to email a purchase order, you get to choose from these contacts who all you want to send it to. So there's a lot of benefit from putting in your contacts. A box for an alternate contact, a box for a confirmed method. Did you talk to him over the phone? Did you get it as an email? How did you confirm it? Then there's this button here for copying the vendor notes to the comments. Now, these come by default from the vendor notes tab and flow onto the purchase order, just like customer notes do onto a sales order. And they appear here in this little box just for information. If you want them copied to the comments, which print out with the purchase order, you can click this button. And then if we go to the comments tab, we can see they were added here. Now you have line notes on the lines that print next to each line, whereas the comments, those print at the bottom of the whole purchase order. We'll cover more about comments in a moment. Next, we have what warehouse is this for? We have the initials of who entered it. And just in this test database, I don't have any initials. That's why this is blank. This will normally have your initials here. We've got carrier number, terms, the freight method, and then our warehouse address by default. But you can check the override ship to address box if you need to put in a custom place you want it delivered to. If this came from a quote, the quote date would be populated. This I just did as a new order, so it starts with the order date as today. And then we have an overall due date for the whole purchase order, but you can still indicate per line item a due date per line. Now these job reference and sales order fields, if we look back on our list screen, you can see those appear out here on the list screen. So these are user-defined character text fields to where you can type anything you want and be able to search for it out here on the list screen. So it can be really handy when you're looking for something particular. You also have a sales order number field. And this, if you convert from a sales order, which a lot of people aren't aware they're able to do, can right-click on a sales order and convert it to a purchase order. It will automatically have that populated here. Otherwise, you can manually associate this purchase order to a particular sales order. Now, the lower grid, you right-click anywhere in the white space to add a new line. You can copy a line, you can delete a line. From here, you can jump to the item details or the item status for that line. Let's just start off here with and some people like to search for the part number, and some people like to type the part number. So what Claire has done, thank you, Claire, is provided us both an item search and an item enter. So depending on what type of person you are, you can hide or display the other one. And then you can save your layout down here. Of course, it wants me to pick a part number. Let's enter a few parts here. And in this case, I'm just entering quantity and numbers just to get some data on here that you can see. And by default, the cost that flows onto here comes, depending on how your item types are set up, can flow directly from your standard or your weighted average cost. But there's also a setting for that under company defaults as to if you want your PO unit cost default to flow from the last cost or from your average or from your standard. So you can also have it, a lot of companies have this set to last cost, whatever that was. In this case, we've got some vendor specific cost happening on this part. That's why it's using this particular price instead of its weighted average or standard. And I'll circle back to that and show you that here in a bit. Let's look at the other fields we have available. You notice there's a lot of fields across here. We've got drawing number, drawing rev, manufacturing item number, in addition to the vendor item number. So those are things we give you on the item itself. If we go down here to manufacturer tab, you can have manufacturer part numbers, and those print out on the purchase order. Vendor part numbers, these print out as well. We actually give you a dialog to ask if you want to display those or not on the printout. And you can have vendor specific costing set on these as well. It shows you how much you've received so far and how much is on back order, which is nice to be able to open up the purchase order and immediately see that without having to do a bunch of research. We've also got GL department here. This is very handy if you need to make sure your money is hitting certain buckets. So we also have company settings to force this to be entered to where they're not allowed to save that purchase order without having selected departments. So that's something can be helpful for your AP people, especially. We've got what manufacturing order it's for and what task number it is for. These can be used in a couple of different ways. It can be informational if you have some settings turned off, but it can be used to actually automatically issue. There's a setting down here at the end to automatically issue to that when it comes in. And there's some company settings that go along with this as well. So you can have automatic material issues happen to the work order as you do receipts from your purchase order to kind of automate some things. When you do out service, you also have to have these populated. And I'll come back to that. Now we have a override description. This prints instead of your regular description. And so you could have maybe what's there, but maybe it's you need to be a little more specific or have it worded a little different, especially on out service tasks. We've got you a completed checkbox to where you can mark that line is completed. Maybe you're not going to receive everything on it. Now, if you receive everything on that line item, it automatically marks it completed. If you receive everything on the purchase order, it automatically marks the whole purchase order as completed. But if maybe you're not going to receive everything on that line and you would just want to manually mark a line as completed, you can do that. This is where you can set the requested due date different per line item if you want to put it all in one PO, but you need different delivery dates. Whether or not it should be taxed, at the moment this is just informational. Then we've got line note. This is a memo field that you can have as much text in here as you want. So again, comments appear at the bottom of the purchase order and print there, whereas line notes will appear below each and every line, wherever there's a line note exists. We also give you the drawing number and the rev and auto issue too. There's a field list over here that you can pick and choose your fields. One thing we have I want to talk about is the original requested due date. So, you may need to move your requested due dates over time, but a lot of our customers still want to be able to see what was it originally, so we know what to hold them to or go back and discuss with the vendor. So we store that for you. After the first time you have these lines, then it'll be stored there, so you can always pull it up and look at it. We also give you average and standard cost. I had Claire add these for customer one time. They wanted to be able to, as they made orders, look at their average and standard and compare it to their current what's on the PO. So if something was way, out of whack, that would be a flag to you to go. You can just right click from here, immediately open that part, and maybe get its cost back into the realm of something reasonable. We've also got a stocking of measurement. That's about it for the fields. We do show you if it's lot or serial controlled. So there's a few other options you could display here. Now on the comments tab, we have a new feature. You can come down here and just type or paste things. But Claire has added a new feature here called comment templates. They're stored under defaults, comment templates. And you can, have a set of maybe predefined comments you're having to add to every PO or certain types of purchase orders all the time. And so this is something we found to be useful. You can say, I want these notes for that template. Maybe I also want to say something about documentation. So you can continue to add those predefined templates to your comments, which is nice. Saves a lot of typing or pasting. Now, approvals. We have a whole approval system that you can use or not use. It's up to you for purchase requests, purchase quotes, and purchase orders. And folks can have their own dollar limits. So you could say one person is able to do so much on POs, and then they're able to approve so much with APs. And then you can force the approvals to be used, or you can have that part of the system turned off. We can help you set that up if need. But if you have the approvals on, you can say who should approve that. You have a recording of who requested it from when the request first originates. And then users can literally have their screen filtered to what is not yet approved and who should approve it. You could have it filtered to your name if you're specified, and basically check your queue every day, and whatever's in there, you need to review and approve. And then you just open it up, click the approve button after you've reviewed it, and it records the date, the amount, your name. So that's something kind of handy. And we have that for payables, invoices as well, these same fields. So if you don't use specific users, you can filter by dollar amount and then by whether or not it's been approved. And you just kind of review your queue every day. Next, we've got a deposit tab. And this is informational at this point. We do have some work coming to be able to make actual credit card transactions in relation to deposits. Vendor attributes. Now these flow from the vendor. So the vendor's attributes tab, in this case, drop test, their shipping hours, if they have insurance. These can be whatever you set them up to be. And then you fill them out per vendor, and they flow onto the purchase order, kind of like for reference, so that you can be reminded of these things or see these things or track these things. Now, revision is something super handy, especially for purchase orders. And this is something we also print out onto the purchase order. You can choose to show the revisions. As you make changes, let's say they called and they reduced the quantity because they can't meet a particular delivery date. You could do that, and you indicate what line it's for and the reason. Maybe they couldn't ship all 100 or whatever it is. You can choose a related employee if necessary and a reason code. These are those rev codes that you set up under here. So these would be whatever you want them to be. And then when something's going on, it's much easier to look back at this revision tab and see why it changed the way it did. Now we do have a data log that records each and every change to the purchase order. So who did what, when and where. We can dig into that, but I would encourage you to use the revision tab as much as possible, and data log is a last resort. even without running the data log, it does at least show you who created it and what time and date. And then like all of our modules in the ERP, we have a documents tab to where you can drag and drop an email, a drawing from the for the vendor to work from. You can also right click and copy and paste directly or do a scan directly if you have a desktop scanner. So that's all the tabs across the top and the basic purchase order and how it works. So let's hit OK on this and let's look at make from. Make from, hit new MF. The screen is a little bit different. All these other tabs across the top are the same, but the main details screen is set up a little different. That's because we're looking at the bill of materials for the item in the lower grid. Let's pick up a warehouse here. Now, when you use make from, it is necessary that you have set up a vendor warehouse. Your warehouses on the settings tab. If it's a vendor specified warehouse, you can select them in the drop down, and then they become available in your make from list. Now, let's add in a part number onto here, and let's say we're going to get 20 of these front wheels. In this case, we're going to hand over these materials to the vendor, and they're going to give us back the finished good up here. So these quantities you see down here are proportionate to the part up top. So if we go look at this actual part, these two items down here on its materials tab is what it takes to make that. But there's not any labor on that because the labor is done by the vendor and the labor is the make from amount. So it's pretty similar in every other way. Let's see, we do have a reference field entered by. You can have a quote, make from request, quote or order.
One thing to add, Daniel, on that is at the very bottom next to the notes button, there is create transfer order from and one step. And when you're doing a make from, you may have already drop shipped the materials to that vendor warehouse, and that's why we're making you create a vendor warehouse for a make from, because we're trying to manage that inventory and take it out of our local stock. So if you have not already sent the materials via a drop ship on another purchase order to that warehouse, you can, at this point, it will create a transfer order, and you can say from what warehouse it is. You can click the one-step button, and then that will, upon the OK here, it will transfer those materials, the two items of the materials tab, to that vendor warehouse. We don't always do the one step because it allows your inventory department or shipping to look at the transfer order and transfer it with a separate piece of paper. But it's important to note that that's why we have a vendor warehouse, is because we're trying to manage that material you've sent to the vendor. Thank you.
Good point. Thanks for mentioning that. Now, in our discussion about make from, let me pause on that for a minute. And here's a little chart I made to kind of explain the difference from, knowing when to use a make from purchase order versus when to do a regular PO and out service, because some people get confused between the make from and out service. So basically, in a make from situation, you only want to do that when you have no part of the manufacturing process, but you're providing all the materials to the vendor. They're going to give you back a finished good. Whereas everything else is done on a regular purchase order: raw materials, subcontract, consumables, non-inventory thing purchases, out service. And the way out service works, that's where you do have a vendor that's providing some sort of step, subcontract step, but you still finish it, or you still have some part of the manufacturing process. Maybe they finish and do the last task, maybe you do the last task, but in one form or another, you provide the product to the vendor, they do a step, you get it back and finish it and put it into finished goods. So if you have any part of the manufacturing process at all, you want out service, not make from. Now there's a blog I did recently on steps for outside processing. You can go to technoerp.net and click on our blog, and it's one of the latest ones here. And it will walk you through every step of actually performing an outside process. It's a bit lengthy, so I didn't try to fit it on this. But basically, it involves creating a labor task, whether you do it on your item master or on your manufacturing order, and actually indicating that on a purchase order, you associate the line on that purchase order to your work order, and you do have to use the out service part number. And then as you perform a receipt, it automatically applies the cost to the work order. That's the basis of it. You can read through the blog there for more on that. Now, and we have some customers currently implementing this where they want to get more departments involved in entering purchase requests. And so you can grant your users the ability under the purchasing module. You could say, I don't want them messing with POs, but I do want to give them access to enter purchase requests. So Claire has separated that into its own little module here where you can give them access to that. And then what they can do as they enter requests, you can review them, and then you can open it up and you can change it literally right here to a quote or put it on order. Now our quotes, in similar fashion, you can right click on and say status change to on order. And then it asks you if it's today's date or what date you want to use to put it on order. So it's real easy to even find a purchase order you've already completed and hit a copy. Claire's given us this copy button on all these screens. You can copy a request and turn it into an order. Could copy an order and put it back to being a request. Could copy a quote. So it's real easy to kind of copy something, just change its status just to get you up and going, then delete the line that's different or add a new line or what have you, change your dates maybe. So this is handy, just being able to change the status. Now, so that's quote, on order, and request. As far as completed and canceled, completed happens automatically as you perform receipts. But if you don't receive everything on that purchase order, it can be just kind of dangling out there. And so you can open the purchase order, manually set it to completed. And when you do that, sometimes you may want to talk to your AP person to make sure there's not stuff hanging out there in POs received, not invoiced, especially if you're going to reconcile the quantity differences on another purchase order. That can mess up your AP people. And then you've got canceled. Now to see all purchase orders or request quote, you can right click on this active bar and load all to go back in time. You can add last 90 days, however far you want to go back. So this is how you could find a order that was already set to completed. Maybe you need to put it back on order so that you can edit it or do, bump up the quantity and do something else on it. And then there's, non-inventory versus your actual materials. You can still create non-inventory items and do those on purchase orders if you need to. Now, by default, your purchase order screen may be set by your order number, maybe by your requested receipt date. Some people look at this kind of like a schedule, but really we have a separate screen in here, purchasing schedule, that shows it by line item, so you can see the actual part numbers. You can even drag item number up here and group by your item number so you can see all the POs that it's on. Maybe you want to group it by vendor. So this is a really great screen for managing what all you got coming in and when. We've got the requested receipt date over here, last received, how much has been received so far. So if there's a balance still open on that. You can right click on any line item to jump to that purchase order and view that. Now we've also got, let me pull open an item here as an example. Under the item status screen, which is one of your best friends if you use the program, this screen is great. But it shows you across the top if you've currently got something on purchase order, and if it's on a make from order, and the last purchase order receipts or make from receipts. So you've got history you can look at here as well as what's active. On the general tab, it's showing me I've got 443 of this currently on purchase order. I can look right there at what they are. I can right click and jump to open that PO. And then the receipts is great because it's showing me cost. And you can jump to look at that particular receipt or related AP invoice. So status screen is really helpful for doing research or seeing what kind of activity is going on with something. So let's do a receipt for a purchase order that we did. So under purchasing and receipts, we'll hit new. And again, you can right click and load to go back in time if you want to look at completed receipts that have already been done. Let's see, that's one of them. What was the last? We did that one for ABC. Let's do a receipt for that guy. 21. Now, receipts you can also use to correct mistakes. Let's say you received in 15 of something and you realized, oh, it's actually 12, you know, and it weren't for 15. You could do another receipt for a -3 or a negative quantity, and just to use to reverse a mistake, and it pulls it back out of your inventory. So we would use receipts typically to correct processing mistakes, or let's say you got the cost wrong on the purchase order and you need to reverse the receipt, then you fix the cost, then you redo the receipt, things like that. Whereas if you're actually giving the product back to the vendor, we do those under return to vendor. Now, for all intensive purposes, the screen looks the same. It's just that the RTV box is checked and it's under a different screen. It has its own print form. Just to give a more clear indication there that this is actually going back to the vendor versus correcting your own mistakes under receipts. So let's, if you're receiving everything on the PO, you could hit remaining button and it just populates the to receive. If you're doing a partial quantity receipt, then you could enter in the actual quantity that you're going to receive. And one of these is lot controlled, this item here, so we have to enter the lot numbers that we're receiving. Let's see this line, we're seeing we're going to receive 3, so let's do 2 of those, and we can right click and do a new line. Maybe we've got 1 of this other lot. And then if you're not going to receive everything on that PO, but you want to go ahead and mark the PO closed, then you can check this little box down here at the bottom. Now we've got a pack slip reference that you can type in there. We'll also print out with the receipt if you do printouts on those. And there's a separate tab Claire added for it if you need to type in a bunch of notes about the receipt. So we'll hit OK on that. Now we're getting a prompt here that one of these items or more requires inspection. I can see from this checkbox back here that it's line 2. These black pegs require inspection. So if you have an item marked for inspection, it pops up and warns you here at this point. Now we right click to actually post the receipt. You can also print receiving labels from here. We can help customize those for you if you need them particular sizes for different printers. Or you can print a receipt traveler, and under related, you can jump back to that vendor or that purchase order just by right clicking. So we're going to hit post. Now let's go perform an inspection for the one item that needed it. We're going to go to purchasing and inspection. Here's our latest one from the last PO. Now, if there was already an inspection on it, it would appear here, and then you can right click and post those. When I click on it, nothing appears here, so I can tell there's been no inspection on this. I'm going to hit new. And it's saying we received 9. How many are you accepting? How many are you going to use as is? How many are you going to reject? So I can say all 9 are good. Now there's a company setting in relation to this. Talk about real quick. This setting here under quality, non-conformance requires MRB. If this is not checked, then whatever quantity you reject here, it will automatically create a return to vendor for that rejected quantity. If the company setting is checked, then it will automatically move whatever rejected quantity you indicate to the MRB warehouse for review. So we have customers that want it one way and some use it a different way. They do MRB before they disposition it as a return to vendor. So we have provided that option. So with it checked, in this case, it would move it to MRB should I reject some. Now, we've got a criteria tab up here. Let me open the related item so I can show you that. Because inspection, you can make it real simple or you can get complicated, just depending on how you want to do your inspections. You can, on the inspect tab of the item, you can just check this box and say inspection is required. Or you could take it a lot further and you can set up acceptable quality levels to where you, let's see, I have, oh wait, that was on the menu page about that. They're purchasing other. You can see and set up acceptable quality levels. You can set up inspection methods, inspection tools that you might use to do the inspection with, a sample plan, like maybe if it's within a particular batch size, you have to reject a particular, if you've rejected a particular amount of that, you're going to reject the whole batch. So you can get pretty complicated with this. And then on the item itself, after you set these levels, then you can add new rows and say, for this task, you're going to use that tool, and we have this expected value, and here's its tolerance and the method and so forth. So you can get pretty crazy with that. And then on both the inspection and under work orders, sorry, I'm jumping around a lot here. I'm just trying to show you the tabs. We have a criteria tab. So on both of these, you say how many records there are for the inspection that you're doing, and it'll add rows here. And then you can go through and record the actual values that you got. So in case you need to record all that information, you can do that. Okay. Close some of those. Now, let's look at the MRP tab of the item, because there's some really cool things you can do. If you go through and you can see here, we've got a primary vendor column that you can display on your list screen too. You really want this populated on all your purchase products where possible because it allows you to automate some things in ERP. This is on the MRP tab. You've got a primary vendor. Now, if you populate this, then from other screens, you can automatically convert things into purchase orders. For example, under our purchasing and reorder screen, this is giving you all sorts of great information about what you have in the system that's on demand, what its min stock quantity is, what your min buy build amount is, your lead time. All these things help you make decisions about when you're getting things. They help perform MRP calculations. And if from here you decide to convert a bunch of things into purchase orders, it can do that because you've populated the primary vendor. So that's something you really want to get set up. Another thing is the lead time. This is a huge help in knowing how long something's going to take, suggesting due dates and delivery dates on your sales orders in real time as you're entering the line item, looking at when it's going to come down the road, being able to give you realistic MRP. You really don't have nothing there. Even if you have to start it with a week or something, it's just highly recommended to get these things populated. Min is important. Critical stock, either of these, it can look at this in the reorder screen and say, okay, you don't have any on demand, but you're below your critical stock level. We should go ahead and get some of these coming. You can indicate a substitute item when that item is not available, a default buy method, standard package quantities, and you can even do this per warehouse. So in the lower grid, you can add warehouses and say, for this warehouse, I want a minimum stock of that. For this warehouse, I want a minimum stock of this. And you can check whether or not they should be nettable in the calculation when looking at quantities. So if you want to say, ignore whatever's in this warehouse, I don't care about that, you can uncheck that box. There's an automatic stock level feature that's pretty cool, and it works hand in hand with these stocking days to where you can tell the system, if I use that on a work order and it's going to make me go short, I don't have enough in stock, do a receipt automatically for the difference. This is similar to what's used in
it's slightly different. I mean, you've got the auto stocking level will help you set the minimum in the reorder. And what you were starting to allude to, Daniel, is another point is
consignment.
The consignment. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. What else? So the MRP tab is really going to help you start automating things. What we try to encourage people to do is not get too overwhelmed with MRP and looking at that, but to get comfortable with the reorder screens. There's a reorder under both purchasing and under manufacturing before you get into the MRP. And so these are looking at what's currently on demand, either on sales order or you've got things converted into work orders and they're calling for a demand of purchase parts. So if under manufacturing reorder, I were to convert these into work orders, now it may call for more submaterial parts. So reorder is looking at active demand, whereas MRP actually drills all the way down and forecasts out, looks at from the lowest level of bill of materials that are on your sales order for a subassembly of a subassembly, it'll drill all the way down and pull that out. Now on the MRP, you can, when you do an MRP run and it completes, then you can right click on it and go to purchasing and look at what proposed purchase orders does it think I should do based on looking out. And then you can convert those to purchase orders right from here and track which ones you've already turned into purchase orders versus which ones you haven't. You can look at where an item is used or its current item status, or what's the MRP calculation for how it got to that number. I want to see the logic and the dates here. So we let you drill into that too. Now, when you right click on it and go to purchasing expedite, this is more for the current purchase orders you've already got for that item, but maybe you need to move the date forward because you need it sooner than the current delivery dates that it sees. And then there's other ones that you can decide to check. Give you another screen for if you've got an excess of something, etc. So I would say start with reorder and then slowly work yourself into MRP. Now on the reorder screen, there's all sorts of cool information that Claire gives you here. If you scroll to the right, you can see our usage in the last 90 days, 0 to 90, some the last 30 days, how much you've been quoting of this, transfers, just all kinds of things. I like that at the top, you can filter it by warehouse, by a project code. So those are created under manufacturing. You can filter it to just the sales order you're curious about or just the work orders you're curious about. So you can filter the screen as you need. And then it's very similar, if you notice, to the item status. You've got some of these figures over here to the left are some of the same ones you've got here, but the reorder screen will give you a little more information. Okay, let's look at vendor contacts real quick. So I kind of showed you those, that you can have your contacts here, and then in your purchase orders, when you go to email one, those are the folks that show up in your drop-down list right here. So you can choose, you can always CC, put a name in here if they're not in your list and you don't want to permanently add them. But if you do, you would hit new on this tab, just type their name and their email and such and hit OK, and then it saves them in here. And then you can select who's the primary contact up here at the top. And this one's always populated by default when you go to do an email. So I found out we've got some customers that are still saving as a PDF and then going and attaching it to an email. And that's fine, you can do that. But we just want you to know the option is there. You can automate some of those things and email directly from the ERP. Now let me show you vendor costing. So if we go out to our items list, and let's look at that part number we used earlier, rear frame plate. So inside the item, we give you the vendor part numbers here, but it's not cost information. For that, you right click on the item from the list screen and go to cross-reference and then vendor cost. And so here you can set up, just one line or as many lines as you need per vendor to say when they buy between this quantity and that quantity, they get this price. When they buy between this quantity and that quantity, you get it for this cost. And you can have lead time differences there too that figure into your calculations. So here, if we buy 101, we get it at 75 cents versus the 89 cents when we buy less than 50. So you can, and these automatically flow on your purchase order based on that part number and that vendor. Let's see, I showed you the company defaults there. Let's look at vendor surveys for a moment. So there's some setup if you decide you want to do vendor surveys. We've got vendor survey attributes. These can be whatever you create. In this case, we made certificate, registrar date, and the expiration date. They could be check boxes for true and false, or a string that you type in, text. You can have scopes and methods, like this is only about the material, or this is for the plating. Is it an external audit? Is it sole source? So there's a few things to set up if you want to do that. The cool thing is that there's a setting in here to say, let's see, search survey. Approved vendor survey is required when you create a purchase order. So if there's not a survey for that vendor, or if that survey is expired, it's not going to let you complete a purchase order for them. So that's something you can turn on and enforce. And then it looks here to see if that exists or it doesn't, let you go on. So you can create the surveys directly in the program. There's attributes we can add, comments you can type in. It's kind of like all the other things we have under quality, customer complaints, non-conformances. And so vendor surveys is under there, under quality. Next, let's look briefly at stock unit measurement versus buy unit of measurement. So obviously you don't want to have to just constantly convert math in your head every time you do a purchase order. So what we give you on the item master is a stock unit of measurement, a buy unit of measurement, and a sell unit of measurement, and then a conversion factor for those. So in this case, we've got some C190 coding, and we stock it by the gallon because that's how we consume it and use it. So we need to do our manufacturing material issues by the gallon, but we always buy it by the 5-gallon pail. And so it's going to take the quantity on the PO and multiply it by this number, that's 5 when you do the receipt, to stock it by the gallon. So sometimes mistakes can happen with units of measurement. I see big costing issues there. This is something that can save you some headaches. Just kind of automate that for you a bit. We also have an option related to that called, as to which one you want to see in the reorder screen. Use the buy quantity and the purchase reorder screen. So some people like to look at that in stock. Some people like to look at it, so we have a setting there that you can specify your preference. And you can see all these other defaults in the program in relation to purchasing. We've got whether or not you want vendor consignments to do those auto receipts. That's what me and Claire were talking about earlier. If you want to enforce the preferred vendor items, if you want to do, this is where you can indicate suffixes and prefixes on the receipt. You can have the lot auto-populate with the next number. You can do where the PO, if it's got a manufacturing order line specified on that purchase order, automatically add that line to the BOM of the work order. When you post the receipt, you can automatically call for its material issue post if it's associated to a work order line. Do you want the item notes to flow onto the purchase order? So some folks use the notes on the notes tab of the item, and you can have this flow onto the sales order or onto the purchase order, onto the work order. There's settings for all of those. Do you want to enable the buy conversion editing in the PO screen? So some people want to change that every time they do a purchase order, and we let you edit it there. Automatically call prompting, automatically call posting, so things don't get left dangling out there. If you need a buffer time to review things before you post, then you probably don't want this on. But if you have stuff just sitting out there that needs to be posted, you could think about turning some of these on. This one here is where you can turn on the approval process, where POs require approval. And we've got other stuff in here, whether you want to require department entry, add overhead costs to purchase items, vendor survey required, we saw that one. So there's some settings in there you can review and customize how the program behaves for you. Also under purchasing, we've got the standard ones, charts and graphs that you can have. Could do, like a day span here. Say I want to see my top 10 purchased item types by date span. Maybe you want to look at your top 10 purchased items. So these are, if you want some pretty graphs and charts, we can help you create these, or you can create your own using SQL. Same with the custom queries. There's really, those are pretty much the same one's just going to be data in a grid versus, an actual graph chart. So if you just want to export friendly to Excel, you can have those. We can help you create these as well. We've got, want to look at obsolete items in the last 24 months, or maybe you want to look at slow moving items the last 365 days. So we can help you create these if you don't have them. Totals, we've got 3 tabs in here: quantity ordered and received, the amount ordered and received, and the amount on open orders. Whenever you first open these, they're always blank, so you hit refresh to pull in data. And then you can right click on grid items to expand or collapse fields. You can stretch it out, customize how I like the look, and then you can save your screen so it remembers your layout. And you can drag and drop. So like these things at the top, I could drag item type down in here. So these are fields you can use in your filters. Across the top, we've got the period that the data is for. So like maybe I just want to look at the previous year, and I want to look at it by quarter, and I want to do an average on it instead of the sum. You can do that. Amount ordered, amount on open orders. These are basically like pivot tables that you can customize or lay out yourself. Last, we've got history, purchasing history, and you can go back in time. Could group by item. So these are really helpful in research because you can right click directly and jump to the source of that. You could look at that PO. You can actually copy the PO. I forgot we added this, Claire. You can copy the PO right there from history. Forgot what customer requested that. Now there's a purchasing POs received, not invoice screen. And your AP people would love it if you monitor this from time to time, help them keep it cleaned up. A lot of times something will get fixed on another purchase order and the original one never closed out or dealt with, or, and it's just hanging out here as a liability. And if they send in that invoice. So this is a really helpful screen to monitor what have you said you've received that you haven't yet gotten an invoice for. And then you can clear items off of the screen if it should no longer be on there and you're not going to get the invoice for it. Or you can go back in time, you can unclear things that you previously cleared. So let's open for questions. We got a few people on here. If anyone's got any questions, you make sure to unmute yourself, and then we got Claire on here too, so the expert can help us out. Does anybody have any questions on what we've covered so far? So I got a lot of little screens open here. I mean, I'm sure most of you have probably been using the purchasing module quite some time. So maybe a lot of this is familiar to you already.
And if you see something, that you need to dive into a little bit more, let us know, because, the purchasing module does get kind of complex because we have, technically 3 different kinds of POs. We have different options on how to process POs. We have some automatic creation of POs. So it's a very dynamic deal. And it's okay if you're only using a small segment of it too. It's just really what your organization needs. Well, if there's no more questions, so we'll give you another 30 seconds to interrupt me. We'll let Daniel go since he's talked for the last hour. Let him get a a glass of water, and anybody with question, we'll call it. Call it good.
All right. Thanks, Claire. Thanks,
Thanks.
Daniel.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining.